Time is not neutral. It is shaping you, even while you think you are only passing through it. Some people grow older. Others grow deeper. The difference is not years. It is how consciously the self meets time. In this episode, Iqbal's idea of time as a teacher becomes clear. Time does not reward urgency or brilliance. It rewards consistency, alignment, and patience. Whatever the self repeats with attention, time slowly turns into identity. Time is not passing. The self is becoming. Today, we continue our 50-part journey through Allama Khudi. The Secret of the Self by Allama Iqbal. This is episode 22. In this reflection, we explore how time silently shapes the self, and why conscious repetition matters more than speed or intensity. Allow these thoughts on time, patience, and becoming to unfold gently within you. Time is not neutral. It does not merely pass. It shapes. What it shapes depends on how the self meets it. Some cells age. Others mature. The difference is not duration, but engagement. Time serves the attentive self and erodes the passive one. The self often thinks time is something it lacks. But time is not the scarcity. Attention is. What the self gives attention to is what time builds. Unattended time dissolves into habit. Habit unattended forms without intention. Unintentional habit slowly erases possibility. The self awakens too late and wonders where life went. The self that wishes to grow must treat time as material. Material shaped daily becomes structure. Material neglected becomes waste. Time reveals truth relentlessly. Illusions survive moments. They do not survive years. Only what is practiced endures time's pressure. The self becomes strong, not by racing time, but by aligning with it. Alignment produces rhythm. Rhythm reduces friction. Friction exhausts and fades. Consistency compounds quietly and dominates. The self must stop envying speed. Speed hides fragility. Durability grows slowly. Time rewards durability more than brilliance. Time magnifies behavior. Small choices repeated become character. Character revealed over time becomes destiny. Destiny is not dramatic. It is cumulative. The greatest waste of time is unconscious repetition. Repetition without awareness builds identity accidentally. Accidental identity rarely aligns with purpose. The self often blames time for its own indecision. Indecision allows time to rule blindly. Decision reclaims authorship. Authorship disciplines time. The self must recognize That time cannot be stored. It can only be invested. Investment always reveals value later. The future is the invoice of the present. The self that plans without action accumulates fantasy. Fantasy collapses under time. Action, however imperfect, ages into competence. Time exposes intention. Declared values fade unless enacted. What is not lived consistently cannot survive years. The self learns that postponement is a form of self-betrayal. Life delayed rarely arrives intact. Time favors those who begin imperfectly. The self that honors time does not rush it. Rushing creates carelessness. Carelessness multiplies error. Precision survives time. Time reveals integrity. Promises made lightly decay quickly. Promises kept quietly become reputation. Reputation carries weight across years. The self cannot cheat time. Shortcuts only borrow from the future. Borrowed time is paid back with interest. Time collects truth fully. The self that grows accepts seasonality. There are seasons of effort and seasons of reflection. Ignoring seasonality exhausts the will. Honoring it preserves strength. Time humbles arrogance. Brilliance fades. Only structure endures. Time tests foundations harshly. Weak foundations collapse later. Strong foundations lengthen endurance. The self must measure progress, not by peaks, but by stability. Stability resists erosion. Erosion is time's silent work on neglected structures. Time does not bless intentions. It rewards execution, day after day, without spectacle. Spectacle distracts. Discipline accumulates. The self understands that waiting for the right moment misreads time. Time creates moments through action. Action converts waiting into becoming. The self that respects time shapes identity gradually. Gradual growth does not shock the system. It integrates quietly. Integration lasts. Time judges honestly. It is immune to excuses. Excuses lose relevance across years. Only patterns remain visible. The self begins to feel that time is ally, not enemy. Time magnifies sincerity. False selves fear time. True selves mature through it. The self that wastes time feels life evaporating. The self that shapes time feels life condensing. Condensed life feels meaningful. The self must learn that being late to its own growth cannot be blamed on fate. Fate only amplifies choice. Time reveals what choice made permanent. The self that ages without growth has misunderstood time. Time was not meant to be survived. It was meant to be used. The self awakens to a truth. Time is not passing. The self is becoming. And what it becomes is written every day, without interruption. Time teaches the self what is durable and what is decorative. Decoration fades quickly. Durability remains. After enthusiasm dies, the self often mistakes urgency for importance. Urgency shouts. Importance persists quietly. Time always sides with what persists. The self that chases intensity, structure sustains. Time dismantles excitement, but reinforces structure. Becoming requires patience with unfinished states. What matures too quickly often collapses too easily. Time strengthens what grows gradually. The self must release the illusion of overnight transformation. Sudden change rarely integrates. Integration requires repetition. Repetition requires time. Time demands humility. The self learns that repetition is not redundancy. It is reinforcement. What is reinforced daily becomes reliable. Reliability is discernible only over time. Promises mean little until time tests them. Time measures truth without debate. The self that invests in habits invests in identity. Habits compound silently. Time amplifies their effects. Hidden causes become visible outcomes. The self understands that drifting is also a choice. Drifting benefits entropy. Entropy dissolves form. Form requires intention renewed daily. Time punishes neglect more severely than error. Errors corrected teach. Neglect ignored decays invisibly. Decay surprises only the inattentive. The self learns to measure progress by continuity. Short bursts mislead. Continuity survives interruption. Surviving interruption indicates strength. Time also reveals misplaced effort. Some pursuits look promising briefly, but lack depth. Time exposes shallowness mercilessly. Depth withstands prolonged attention. The self must become honest about where its time goes. Time follows desire. Where time flows unintentionally, desire has not been examined. Examination redirects becoming. The self that respects time simplifies priorities. Too many pursuits dissolve focus. Focus pursuit ages into mastery. Time demands selection. Selection defines trajectory. Trajectory shapes outcome. Outcome becomes identity. The self realizes that distraction multiplies loss. Years wasted feel devastating. Time aggregates behavior without mercy. The self that honors time embraces boring consistency. What feels boring today builds freedom later. Most freedom is pre-built quietly. Time educates through exposure. Repeated exposure dulls fear. Fear fades with familiarity. Time trains courage indirectly. The self understands. That avoidance grows stronger. When postponed, time magnifies avoidance. Confrontation weakens it early. The self begins to schedule life internally. Not rigidly. Deliberately. Deliberation gives time direction. Direction transforms days into chapters. Time reveals whether the self was sincere. Temporary effort collapses. Persistent effort survives. Survival determines authenticity. The self that grows mature accepts slower gratification. Immediate reward teaches impatience. Delayed reward teaches endurance. Endurance stabilizes identity. Time exposes inflated expectations. Reality compresses fantasy. What survives compression is truth. Truth deepens with time. The self learns that pain endured over time teaches restraint. Pleasure extended over time reveals emptiness. Balance instructs growth. Time also reveals misalignment. What drains energy repeatedly cannot be destiny. What energizes despite difficulty signals direction. Time clarifies vocation. The self learns that becoming is uneven. Some days compound. Some days stagnate. Persistence bridges fluctuation. Time rewards resilience, not perfection. The self stops rushing milestones. Milestones matter less than sustained trajectory. Trajectory defines destination quietly. The self realizes that memory lies. Only recorded behavior persists. Time forgets intention. It remembers repetition. The self learns that presence slows time. Distraction accelerates loss. Focused attention densifies experience. Dense experience feels longer. The self that becomes intentional reclaims years from distraction. Reclaimed years feel expanded. Expansion renews vitality. Time gives feedback. Without commentary, life reveals consequences slowly. Slow revelation builds wisdom. Wisdom stabilizes choice. The self that honors time becomes realistic about limits. Limits respected increase usable strength. Ignored limits invite breakdown later. Time exposes inconsistent selves. Inconsistency fragments identity. Fragmented identity lacks endurance. Endurance anchors respect. The self becomes careful not to sacrifice years for minutes of comfort. Comfort trades growth for ease. Time judges these exchanges harshly. The self learns that becoming is irreversible once neglected. Energy lost to drift is difficult to recover. Early attention saves later regret. The self senses that time is compressing meaning. Each lived year demands greater honesty. Honesty simplifies life. Simplified life grows deeper. The self discovers that urgency decreases with clarity. Clear purpose relaxes time. Relaxed time feels generous. The self understands that becoming cannot be rushed. Rushing produces noise, not growth. Time respects alignment, not haste. The self trusted time. Time returned wisdom. There comes a stage when the self no longer argues with time. Argument implies resistance. Understanding implies partnership. The self learns that time was never an enemy. It was a tutor. Time does not demand urgency. It demands honesty. Honesty about effort. Honesty about direction. Honesty about neglect. Time magnifies whatever it receives. The self recognizes that what feels slow is often stable. Stability is invisible while forming. But once formed, it outlasts impulse, fashion, and noise. The self stops panicking about age. Age is not the problem. Unlived time is. Time lived consciously never feels wasted. Only unattended time does. The self understands that discipline is memory made visible. What the self remembers to do daily becomes reality. Forgetting becomes decline. Time rewards alignment. When in a direction and daily action agree, time flows cleanly. Resistance decreases. Life gains rhythm. Rhythm sustains becoming. The self learns that regret is not about lost opportunity. It is about postponed courage. Courage exercised earlier saves years later. Delay taxes time heavily. The self begins to protect mornings, not as ritual, as orientation. How the day begins teaches time what to build. The self also learns to forgive seasons of slowness. Not all growth is visible. Roots grow in darkness. Time respects underground work as much as public effort. The self no longer treats the future as escape. Escape mentality wastes time. The future is not refuge. It is consequence. The self recognizes that consistency is temporal intelligence. Intelligence applied daily outperforms brilliance applied rarely. Rare effort fades. Daily effort accumulates inevitability. Time does not care about intention. It records behavior. Behavior repeated becomes identity. Identity repeated becomes destiny. The self now moves differently. Not rushed. Not idle. Purposefully paced. Pacing preserves longevity. Longevity deepens impact. The self learns that death is not what gives time value. Participation does. A fully lived hour outweighs an avoided year. Time becomes dense with meaning when lived deliberately. Deliberate living slows in a decay. Decay retreats where awareness works. The self understands that becoming is temporal obedience. Obedience to growth. Obedience to effort. Obedience to truth repeated over days. Momentum honors patience. The self no longer asks, "Where did the years go?" It knows. They went into structure, into skill, into character, into lived depth. The self recognizes that immortality, as Iqbal saw it, is not extension of time. It is intensity of becoming. Only that which grows with time survives it. The self closes its eyes to urgency and opens itself to rhythm. Rhythm transforms time into ally. The ally carries the self forward. Time will pass regardless. But now the self knows. Time is not something to survive. It is something to shape. And whatever the self shapes patiently, with truth and effort, time will preserve.